and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverend, Faith and Current Affairs.
Goodness gracious me, we're back. Irreverend, Faith and Current Affairs. Reverend Jamie Franklin, that's me, and I'm joined by my two colleagues today, Daniel French and Thomas Pelham. I think it's right for us to be called colleagues, wouldn't you say, chaps?
Brothers, surely, brothers.
Brethren,
yeah.
Brethren in the Lord and in ministry. Chaps, how's everything going? One of the things I wanted to ask you is how you're doing with all this like coronation stuff. I mean, is this something that you're into, or Tom, you don't even want to watch it? I've heard.
Do you know what, Jamie? I don't really know. I find like I'm a very soft monarchist. You know, I don't really go for the paganry. I know as long as these things are being done.
The paganry.
Yeah, what's it called? No, yeah,
pageantry. Was that a
Freudian slip there, isn't it? Yeah. Pageantry. That's the one. I don't really go for that. I don't really go for watching things on television.
Okay.
In any case, so I just
don't watch TV.
Not very much. Well, I do in the evenings, but it tends to be like Amazon Prime. I've been watching Clarkson's Farm, that sort of thing. I don't watch live TV.
Okay.
Who does?
Not many people nowadays.
No. It's a complete.
So you're against the monarchy because you think it's pagan, and you're against live TV. You'll only support corporate giants like Amazon in your consumption, right?
And he's watching Jeremy Clarkson. There's a picture building up here, isn't there? Really. Now, some people might consider that favourably, others maybe not so.
I think that I do you know what the other thing is? I do services and church obviously as a life. You know, I spend a lot of time thinking about how my services fit together, preparing for them, doing all that sort of kind of the last thing I want. It's a busman's holiday, isn't it? Watching the Archbishop of Canterbury intone his way in that sort of slightly world weary voice, nasal, kind of through what looks like a hacked together liturgy, hacked together from the worst recesses of common worship, with some of these new prayers.
Have you ever watched that TV show Hotel Inspector and its various clones? It strikes me that this is a bit like in my home. You see, my wife worked in the service industry in hotels for about 10 years, and she's really particular about how rooms are presented and meals are put out and that, and she's been a chef and so on and that. So watching this program is a kind of wonderful torture, because she was going, no, that's wrong. No, she should have picked up on that, And I think, if you were going to watch the coronation with a whole load of vicars, can you imagine? It would just be, be like that Hotel Inspector show. We'd all be going, oh, well, didn't do that procession right, did he? And where did he dig up that preface?
But Daniel, you had a piece in the Spectator this week, didn't you? Book of Common Prayer. So well done. Congratulations. It's done really well, actually. It's good.
I think it's sort of looking at the Twitter views and things. I think it's hit the top. So it's funny how that's touched a nerve, really, in particularly at this moment. So
lots of people like the Book of Common Prayer, and for good reason. I think sometimes I have a little break from it just because I feel like I need a little bit of a bit of variation. But going to common worship, it gets old very, very quickly, and when you go back to Common Prayer, it feels so fresh, doesn't it? And deep and spiritual, and I think lots of people really appreciate that.
There is a certain form that's often missing, isn't it, in common worship, in its language, in the way it addresses God and the people, and that somehow it's kind of lost. There's something that's lost. It's very difficult to put into words, but when you know it, and it feels slightly trite. I remember being at Canterbury Cathedral about 20 years ago for a commissioning service for hospital visitors, and the Bishop of Dover started the liturgy with, we gather together, and the congregational response in the booklet is, we come as we are. And I thought, well, who the flipping heck else am I supposed to come as? The Lone Ranger?
Yeah.
You know, now in
right.
the era of gender ideology, well, of course, you know that could mean anything, but
Whoever you like.
there's that kind of triteness, isn't it? That Private Eye in its Rocky Horror alternative service book, when it used to do these occasional pieces once in a while, and was able to lambast, you know, like the liturgical installing of a helter-skelter in a cathedral, with call and responses and creedal statements halfway down the slide. You know, there's something that common worship can do well, but there's a lot that it can do badly, you know, and it can be a bit like a dishwasher manual at times.
Do you know what it does? Do you know what it does do? Doesn't do, which is something the Book of Common Prayer does do, is it doesn't disciple its congregations distinctively. Now, I say this because it's something when we went, Jamie, to when you delivered that fiery riposte to Gavin Assenden in London last month at the conference that we went to. One of the people who was speaking was on the executive body of the Church Society, and he's a vicar in Herefordshire, and he was saying that he has some Book of Common Prayer congregations, and you can sort of tell a Book of Common Prayer congregation because they're formed in a particular way, into a particular way of life, which common worship doesn't do. It doesn't form you in a particular way, and you know the Book of Common Prayer is designed to form you in a way of life that is holy. Common worship doesn't quite have that sort of teleological sort of aim. It's just a sort of it's like an encyclopedia of liturgy. It's dry.
Yeah, I mean, I have this. If I could go back in time, and I'd have done a lot more prayer book liturgy on Sundays, I think, and I'd love to have thought of, you know, even my family in a kind of Benedict option, Rod Dreher way, that we could all have one of these little prayer books, 1662 prayer books, and we'd, you know, maybe read the lesson the day before as a family, you know, and then walk down to church with our little pocket books, knowing what we were going to expect, you know, that there weren't any liturgical surprises that me or any other vicar would suddenly oppose, where we would gather together and come as we are, rather than, you know, actually have to face
you just don't know
dark reflection of our sin as we start, you know.
You don't know what's going to happen nowadays, Daniel, when you go into a church a lot of the time, and I think that's a bit of a problem. I did actually. I was trying to find it actually in my PhD, which was later turned into a book called Charles Taylor and Anglican Theology. I actually wrote about that cathedral incident because there was a helter-skelter in Norwich Cathedral, and there was a golf course, a crazy golf course. That was at
Rochester.
Oh, Rochester Cathedral. Yeah. So I wrote a humorous footnote, which I thought would be taken out. I thought, you know, because when you go through the process when you're doing a PhD or any kind of academic stuff, they take out anything that's funny because they say, oh, you know, that's polemical. But it actually got left in, which I was quite pleased about, because I went through some quite funny, you know, there were some quite funny anecdotes about various, you know, people kicking off with golf clubs and stuff like that, and, you know, disturbing the peace in the cathedral. But that's just a little, just an incidental comment there about my book, which I never mentioned. But
did you write a book, Jamie?
Yeah. Sorry, it's just because it was so relevant, I decided to do so. Just before we go any further, I'd just like to plug our Telegram group, because I really love Telegram. It's I've decided it's my favorite form of social media. Basically, because on our channel, I just get to indulge every whim that I have.
I've noticed this, actually. I have noticed this.
What I've been doing is been making little videos for people.
Yeah, I have seen. Yeah,
which I actually find really helpful, because it helps to focus my mind. Yeah, like helping people, you know, sort of saying what I'm doing, and, you know, what my aims are for the day, and how I'm motivating myself and things like that. So if you'd like to join our Telegram page, it's t.me/irreverend, and you can I'm not sure how well you can see that, but if you're on the video, if you're on the watching on video, or you can go on our website reverendpod.com, and all of our stuff is on there. But join us on Telegram. I love Telegram. Telegram's great. You know, it's just really nice because it's positive. You know, people want to be there. It's not like on Twitter where people are slagging each other off, and it's like, you know, it's like kind of entering a living hell, isn't it? Logging onto Twitter. But Telegram is quite different. One question for you chaps before we do anything else. We're going to go to scripture, but my question for you, yes or no answer, what do you think? is the countryside racist? Tom, what do you think? What's your answer to this question?
What do you mean by the countryside?
No. It's
that's the Oxford way. Yeah.
What's your immediate kind of response? Is it racist? Yes or no?
Well, I met a tree that really didn't like.
Okay, so you say yes, Daniel. What's your view? Is the countryside racist?
Not racist. It's not racist. Jamie.
Okay, you say no. Daniel, what do you say? Is
No.
it no? All right. Well, wrong.
Of course, it's racist, Jamie.
The countryside is extremely racist, and the evidence for this is that apparently, where is it? Let's see a statistic here. Only 1% of visitors to UK national parks are from Black, Asian, or ethnic minority backgrounds, according to the Campaign to Protect Rural England. Their data found that people from ethnic minorities have on average 11 times less access to green space, and of the time they spend in green spaces, only 15% of it is in the countryside. This is compared to 38% for white people. How racist can you possibly get, Tom?
15%. Well, you presumably could get even more racist.
By having less than 1%.
Well, 10% maybe.
Can I just add, if any particularly Nigerian Anglicans, Gafcon Anglicans from the global south want to come to Salcombe and live here, they are more than welcome.
You're not really. Do you count yourself as countryside, though, Daniel? I mean, it's quite metropolitan.
Well, no, we have Marlborough, Galmpton.
Oh, I suppose so.
Hope Cove. So that we are a mix. We are a mixed economy of sea.
And you're probably in a less racist place than Tom. I reckon Tom is almost the way I reckon you basically never ever see anyone from a global majority heritage background where you live, Tom.
It's not true, Jamie.
It's all sheep.
I've got there are sheep. There are some black sheep. But there are global majority world heritage people worshipping in my churches, Jamie.
Are they?
But, there are. And don't sound surprised. We're not actually that far from London, which is the point, isn't it? Because a lot of people settle in cities because that's where the work is, and then sort of where I grew up near New Malden, where there's a massive community of Koreans, and it's wonderful. It's like the food, the cuisine that you can get in New Malden is absolutely amazing.
Nice.
Real love for it, and Korean churches, and it's really important to New Malden, but they don't all, they don't, unlike say British white people who sort of tend to scatter more widely, they tend to stay together, and I think you'll probably find that's the case in for example a expat community in
Spain. Yeah.
Spain or in Africa, the expat communities tend to gather together because it's nice to spend time with people who are culturally similar.
And I suspect you'll find that if you're digging deep into the statistics in the UK, that some of the most gated communities, most difficult ones to actually get into, are the metropolitan woke liberal suburbs.
That may be true, Daniel, but the lead.uk are heading out with this article. Black and brown hikers are taking back Britain's countryside. This is after reports. Various academic studies have shown that the countryside is indeed extremely racist. It's not a particularly well written article, but I'll read some of it. Negative encounters in rural spaces coupled with homogenous messaging in the media and advertising can cause certain myths about nature to be internalized. Among Black and ethnic minority communities, there is a sense that outdoor pursuits are, in inverted commas, not for us, and limiting narratives. These are the limiting narratives. That Black people don't go walking, wrong. Black people do walk. That open water swimming is for white women, wrong. Men and also non-white swim. And that minority groups are only comfortable in cities, also not true. These are all perpetuated. But these myths, this is an important part because this is backed up by evidence, these myths are not plucked from thin air. They are the conditioned response to experiences of racism, hostility, and the pervasive sense of feeling unwelcome in the British.
In other words, there's no data; it's just anecdotal.
No. In the British countryside, no, Daniel, you are being too cynical, sir. Rural racism is real and stands starkly at odds with the perception of peaceful, idyllic green spaces that many would prefer to believe about this country. A 2011 report from the University of Leicester said there are, quote, frequent and alarming forms of racism that affect ethnic minorities in the countryside. And just to help them, the university, because perhaps they don't have any evidence, the university has now commissioned a fresh 2-year study to, quote, develop an evidence base which reveals the ways in which rural racism is expressed and experienced, which is due to begin in October. So there's a gravy train for you, isn't there? A 2-year
study. There's part of me that wants to say, when people say, oh, we're taking back the countryside, well, you're welcome to it.
Really?
It's like when you get this sort of ultramontane Roman Catholics who say, give us back our cathedrals. Well, here you go. You pay for it. You have it. It's a kind of ridiculous place.
What they want to do, Daniel, let me tell you, is they want to make this is how they're going to do it. They're going to make weatherproof. This is not a joke. Weatherproof prayer mats, and they are going to have signs pointing to Mecca along popular hiking routes in the Peak District. I mean, this is real.
Don't tell the Church of England, for goodness sake.
They probably already know. It's probably the Church of England. Yeah.
Probably they're in there.
Oh, good Lord.
Here's an interesting thing, though. Here we go. Nigerian-born Enoch Adeyemi, co-founder of Black Scottish Adventurers, recently shared his experience of hiking with a large group of black men, revealing they're constantly subject to spurious complaints about littering, condensation. Condescension.
Condescension.
It's very chewy morning. Do you know what?
Very specific complaint.
Do you know what? We're not going to edit that bit out.
We don't take anything out, do you? And demands to stop playing music. Why should I turn off my music? Just because white Scottish people enjoy nature one way, that doesn't mean black people have to enjoy it exactly the same way, he told the Daily Mail. Now, hang on. I mean, there's a bit of a difference here, isn't there? There's something if it's the fact that he's being asked to turn off his music that's upset him so much. I mean, I don't know about littering. Hopefully they weren't littering. I see white people litter awfully. Don't litter. It's, take your rubbish home with you.
That's antisocial. That's unacceptable.
It's awful. Whatever your race is, don't litter. But you should turn off your music. If you're wandering along a peaceful part of the world, playing music at presumably a loud enough volume to listen to whilst walking, then you should, because that actually affects other people's enjoyment. And that's not a racist thing to say. It's not racist at all to say please stop playing music. And also you shouldn't enjoy the peace and quiet by making it not peaceful or quiet.
And there's a stereotype in this as well, isn't there, that puts the countryside in the image of it being, completely economically idyllic, when in fact we know that there's an enormous amount of rural poverty, that actually the lives of those in the farming community is often really hard. It's got a high suicide rate. Working, for instance, like here, offshore in the service industry can be tough too. Low wages in many cases. So this idea that there's this Shangri-La, which is the British countryside, which is closed off to everybody but the indigenous population, is rather ridiculous. I think, in many ways, it's a hard terrain to make a living. I'd love it if more people from wherever and whoever came in, and were able to get gainful employment. But particularly the farming community is one that's really is really hard hit,
I think this is. I take your point, Daniel. I think this is more specifically about like walking in the countryside rather than even living there. I think it's a more specific critique. It's that whilst people have been out rambling, they've suffered this racial abuse, and they've got to take these places back. Like, for example, taking action. Register for the inaugural Black to the Trails event taking place on Sunday, the 14th of May 2023 at the National Trust, Dunstable Downs and Whipsnade Estates. This will be the UK's first trail running event designed, directed and run by Black trail runners for Black people, people of colour and community allies seeking to diversify the UK trail running scene.
Hang on. So if you're white, you can't.
Well, you can if you're an ally. If you're against this, though, don't turn up because it's not for you. Educate yourself on rural racism. Read Black Sheep, a story of rural racism, identity and hope by Sabrina Pace Humphreys. Or you can donate or volunteer to Black to Nature. So that's the issue, is that the countryside is very, very racist. There are too many white people in the countryside and there need to be more Black people. So there we go. The countryside is utterly irredeemably racist at the moment, and it needs to change. Okay, that's what we need to be focusing on as a church, and maybe we could talk about that later when we come to talk about the church a bit more. Should we do a bit of scripture, chaps, before we get into our news stories? Is that right? Philippians, we're reading through the book of Philippians at the moment. We're quite close to the end, aren't we? So should we go for Philippians verse 10, chapter 4 verse 10, I should say, onwards? Tom, do you want to do us a few verses of this?
All right then. Okay, can do. Yep. Yeah. So 10 to 13.
Yeah. And just before we start, just to say, people, this is how we sort of frame our shows.
We normally have a prayer first, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We do the Lord's Prayer. So
we do that. Should do that.
Yeah. Well, why don't you do the Lord's Prayer and the reading, Tom? You go for it. You go for it.
Let's pray. I muted myself because normally I have to do that. Let's pray. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at the last your care of me hath flourished again, wherein ye were also careful, but ye lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned, in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me.
Excellent. Beautiful passage about the Lord's provision. So this is the Apostle Paul is in prison, and he's speaking about the way that the Lord has provided for him throughout all of his life. And of course, we have that very famous verse, which is in my RSV says, I can do all things in him who strengthens me. I think that's normally kind of translated through him, or sometimes they say through Christ who strengthens me. Maybe that's a textual variant. I don't know. I'm
just having a look actually, because the modern English version, MEV, has I can do all things because of Christ who strengthens me. I was going to have a look and see what the nearly infallible version said, the NIV. NOSB, the one where they make all the choices that are ungodly.
The woke.
The woke. Well, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Okay.
Yeah, I've got him as well.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, him presumably has to be Christ. Who else? Well, or God, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
NIV, here we go, NIV. I can do all this through him who gives me strength.
Yeah, it's good. It's about contentedness in Christ, isn't it? So, Daniel, any wise words about, finding your contentment in the Lord Jesus from this passage?
In many ways, it's particularly since we've followed the whole epistle through, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's a lovely ending to a lovely summary, isn't it? Really, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. We were discussing on Sunday as a parish, we've been discussing mission, and I think one of the dangers of mission and evangelization is to perceive that it's primarily a sales effort. The problem with the church is just poor marketing, where really we know it's about faithfulness, even more so than success, and it's about leaning and depending on his grace, and that I think can be quite difficult for for communities, for particularly with this sort of pernicious consumerism that's everywhere, that people don't feel that they get what they want from their church, and throw up their arms, or they've got, they maybe have issues that at home that they're the only one who's practicing the Christian faith, and so they bring that anger to Sunday worship, and in a way we have to kind of rebalance ourselves and discover that grace of God in whom we get that strength. We have to share the distress, in a sense, as he says in page 14. Otherwise, I don't think much happens really in terms of mission. It just becomes, a cult or a club, a marketing gimmick. Our evangelization loses that kind of genuine magnetism. Now, I know particularly we might talk about bad examples of ministry later on, and where it's been catastrophically wrong. Because I think if there isn't that leaning on God's grace, then we can get infected by a sort of egotism and wolves disguised as shepherds.
Yeah, and a sort of like you say, sort of managerialism.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll talk about it later with the Church of England Families Report. One of the things that struck me reading through it is just how it doesn't really mention anything to do with God or Christ or the supernatural. It's just all about kind of partnering with other stakeholders in the well-being of society and trying to.
Could have been done by the Liberal Democrats, really, or some kind of secular institution, and you'd have barely noticed the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. Well, thank you for those reflections, Daniel. I think you're very insightful there. Should we talk about some of the stories of the week? So basically what we'll do is we'll talk about a couple of stories out there in the world that have caught our eyes, and then we are going to talk about the church a bit. The Church of England has got a new family. People are waiting with bated breath for this, haven't they? The Church of England Families Report.
I didn't even know it was happening. I mean, should I have known?
No, I didn't know it was happening either. And we are going to talk a bit about the whole Mike Pilavachi thing as well, because I think that will be interesting for people, even if you don't know who he is. He's a big time Christian leader who looks like he's about to be in serious trouble for various allegations that have been made against him. But we'll talk about that in a bit. Chaps, one of the things I wanted to flag up, and I'm not sure there's particularly lots to say about it, but on the last week on the Right to Life website, rightolife.org.uk, they make the point that I don't know which day it was last week. I think it was Thursday last week, marked the 55th anniversary of the Abortion Act coming into effect in our country, which happened in 1968. And since that point, there have been 10,135,618 lives lost to abortion in this country. I'm just trying to see if there are any statistics we'd like to read out. The number of abortions in England and Wales has reached a record high, with 214,869 taking place in 2021, while 13,758 terminations were performed in Scotland the same year. This significant rise in abortions in England and Wales has accompanied the first full year that DIY home abortion services have been operating in England and Wales. Since DIY home abortions were introduced, a number of significant problems have also arisen. And then they go on to speculate about these 10 million lives and what they would have looked like had they been not terminated in the womb.
There could have been Einsteins, Mozart's, Beethoven's. It could have been great people.
Spiritual leaders.
Yeah. It's very sad.
The cure to cancer.
Yeah. Somebody wrote in, I won't read her email now, but she wrote in and she was sort of speculating, if we had the technology to select which babies we abort for criteria other than biological sex, what would we make of that? Because we effectively are doing this kind of thing when we are screening for Down syndrome, cleft palate, these kind of things which you can legally abort children for up to term in our country.
It's sickening. I have there's a chap a wonderful, beautiful chap in my church who's got Downs, and he's my crucifer. And it lifts my heart to see him worshipping God.
Yeah.
Lifts my heart, and then it makes me sort of so upset that such a wonderful person is just not given any right in the womb at all.
Yeah.
Did any of you see late last year the advert that went around this hypothetical new technology for artificial wombs? I think it's Ecto Life. I'm just looking it up here. It's proposing. I think they're clearly looking for some sort of crowdfunding. They're proposing this idea. So there's this very Huxleyan animation showing families receiving their child in this little.
These ones we starve of oxygen for 30 seconds when they are, 6 months old.
And there's this rather haunting bit. I think Russell Brand brought it up in the video where it's as if the commercial stops itself from saying the awful bit that we all know, that if there was something wrong with your child, that problem will be dealt with. In other words, the power socket will be pulled on the device, but the idea is that they could have factories where you could have I think the adverts claims over 30,000 babies a year could be grown in an artificial womb factory facility, and there will be an app that your phone could connect to, and towards the end you could take your baby home in this incubator, and then at some point it'll be ping oven ready. And it strikes me that that this kind of tallies into the abortion culture, doesn't it? That we're just looking at humans as if they are products, units.
Yeah, for our own convenience.
Yeah, and we give them agency and humanity at our convenience.
Yeah. Shocking. It's shocking stuff, and it's very much linked to questions around surrogacy and all of these kind of things as well, isn't it? Which we've talked about quite a lot. But it's just a very sad day. It's a very sad day for our nation, and it's sad that this kind of thing's going on, and it's getting worse. Ultimately, it was interesting when I had did the conversation with Mary Harrington. It was interesting what she said about this, because there is a question about law and what place the law should play in terms of abortion. Say you are, like we are of one mind on it, that it's a morally egregious action. What ultimately needs to happen? Yes, it would be good if children were protected by the law, but ultimately people need to have a change of hearts and minds about this, and to recognize what's actually going on here. Because it's one of those things where I just can't understand why people have the view that why so many people have the view that they do, that this is a illicit thing, but they obviously
and look how the Roe Wade thing, where the repealing of that has drawn out not only activists, but more recently a kind of strange cults and Satanists and what have you, who are integrating a pro-choice rhetoric that is way beyond. It's completely off the scale. Celebratory. It's a
religious thing, isn't it? It's like a religious sensibility that's manifesting itself in the secular world. It's very, very strange. Speaking of which, another weird sensibility that's manifesting itself, and this is, we've talked about this kind of thing before, haven't we? But I just wanted to flag this up. But this is this transgender cyclist, Austin Killips, who has won the women's tour of the Gila, is it? Killips is a man who took up cycling in 2019 and is now intending to compete at the Women's Tour de France and also at the Olympics. So he's been cycling for 4 years. So he started cycling when he was 23. So he was quite a late starter. Now he's beating professional women in this arena. one thing that really caught my eye about this story is that a lady who was a cross cycling champion, Hannah Arensman, retired from the sport at the age of 24. She lost out on a podium place to Austin Killips in the national final in December. That's the man who's competing as a woman. Later accused her, this is Hannah Arensman, later accused her transgender opponent of repeatedly shoving her during the race, which Killips denied. She said, "I've decided to end my cycling career. My sister and family sobbed as they watched a man finish in front of me, having witnessed several physical interactions with him during the race. I feel for young girls learning to compete who no longer have a fair chance of being the new record holders and champions in cycling because men want to compete in our division." So there we are.
Well, I mean, I have been in the past, and I don't follow it so much anymore. Quite a keen fan of cycling, road cycling as a sport, and it's just outrageous, this, isn't it? I mean, it's quite clear that the benefits of puberty that a man has, bigger lung, better capacity to process oxygen, longer bones, bigger muscles. There's no doubt that they're going to outperform women.
Yeah.
And the whole point of the woman cycling is to protect that. I mean, you could. I have a feeling that there have been women who've competed in the men's Tour de France before. They struggled to stay at the front of the pack, let alone have any chance of winning. And it's been a long time since any have done. I mean, in general, it's actually the case that sports are open. The men's sports are actually open to men and women. They don't define who can. There's no reason why you should, which to me suggests that Killips. And the thing is, Killips wouldn't be anywhere near winning even a small cycle race like the Tour of the Gila. If it was a man's tour.
It does make you wonder what the sort of is going on in his mind, to actually sort of take pleasure in doing this to women, beating them at cycling. It's pretty
and there is a bit of contact in cycling often. There shouldn't really be, but there's a physical presence. If you watch the great Mark Cavendish sprinting, there's a lot of sharp elbows in the pack just as he's getting into the right spot, and sometimes he gets done for it a bit, quite rightly. I
wouldn't.
Do you think it's a transactional thing in terms of what's going on psychologically here? That someone in this case is thinking that they have experienced discrimination, so they're cashing that in like a sort of plenary indulgence, with the expectation of coming back to them, the winning of a prize. I deserve this because I've been through this trauma of changing gender, and so prizes are therefore something that I have a kind of a right to, and who's to say that I can't? It's a sort of extreme caucus race, like from Alice. I'm also mindful of the Greek and Egyptian mythology, Ouroboros, the snake that eats itself. You have a movement here in the sexual revolution where, in the end, it starts consuming itself. And you see this this is coming out in sports and changing rooms and whatever, that this kind of competition of rights between gender critical feminists and trans people, trans activism is this sort of this revolution that is devouring itself in this ever kind of engagement of purity, and so. You can't help but feel sorry for women and the girls in this, and think, if this is the standard bearer, if this is the person that's always going to win, why on earth would you even bother participating in this?
Yeah, exactly.
How disheartening. But their feelings presumably are lower on the discrimination ladder, so they're topped, in this game of snakes and ladders.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been asked to try and stoke up a bit more disagreement between us for purposes of debate on this show.
I disagree.
Well, no, I mean, it's difficult because it's hard to disagree, and it's hard to know what to say. That's what I was going to say. Is he finished 89 seconds ahead of his closest competitor, which is Tom. I'm assuming that's quite unusual to finish.
Not really. Well, no, I mean,
18, what, a minute and a half ahead?
Yeah, that happens in
Okay,
professional men's cycling races. But
Okay.
I mean, it is a comprehensive picture, isn't it?
It's a lot, isn't it? So let me just ask. There are actually videos. I'm just on Twitter. There are videos of him pushing women on this as well. So let's think. I just want to try and think because I can't find any tweets which are tweeting in his favour. I mean, there's pictures of him on the podium as well, where he's just, he's so clearly got a different physical frame. So what would somebody who's speaking in favour of this say? Would they say?
Well, they say he's a woman.
He is a woman.
She's a woman.
So they say
she's a woman because she feels like a woman, and she's reduced her testosterone below the legal limit, and that what more can we ask? Where should she compete? She would not compete successfully at the men's stage, having taken steps to transition, because they where can she be? And of course the answer is I don't really know.
People like this, wouldn't they try and sort of they try and blur the lines between categories, wouldn't they? So they'd say, well, there are sort of there are women who have high levels of testosterone, which are unreasonably naturally disproportionately high, so that's unfair as well. So where are you going to draw the line, type thing?
Presumably it's a cumulative thing, isn't it? Because it's not just testosterone; it's the effect that testosterone and your
has had
over puberty, and that that has affected the structure of your body. And Tom mentioned your lungs. That I believe that if a female, say a 14, 15-year-old female starts injecting herself with testosterone, that there are levels of testosterone that her body is not used to and not made for. It's not physically.
It would have the effect of masculizing a woman's body if you were to do that. So which is it's part of the treatment, isn't it? But it's not. It's not necessarily healthy for the body. You're right. It's not. We don't really know the long-term effects of this sort of thing is, but certainly it causes irreversible changes in women who have high level of testosterone. But really, the point is that that's a red herring. Really, the testosterone is a red herring. The differences are done not just in the current testosterone levels, but also in as you say, in how your body is after puberty, and that's scientifically proven. There's no doubt about that. The British Journal of Sports Medicine has definitely shown that that there are long-lasting bonuses to being a man.
Yeah,
even if you suppress.
But can you imagine? There was an advice piece put out by the Department of Education yesterday, I believe, on school sports, that transgendered pupils should only play in their biological received gender or sex, because there's a real danger if you put the wrong gender in the middle of a rugby scrum. You're going to kill some. I mean, my son plays rugby. I've watched these matches. I wouldn't be untrained. I wouldn't want to be in the middle of the receiving end of some of these wallops.
It'd be the other way around, though, wouldn't it, Dano? It'd be,
but if it was the other way around,
if you have a bloke going into a women's scrum, that would be. I mean, you probably wouldn't. I don't imagine there'd be many women who would be up for the other way around.
You could kill someone.
Yeah. I've cycled through about 100 tweets of the top tweets when you type in Austin Killips, and I've only found one so far, which is speaking in his favour. It's from a person called Benz Sigelmeyer, and he has turned off replies, so you can't tell whether people like this or not. Austin Killip, there is one aspect which overrides the rules of your emotions. These are your emotions. It's not biological facts, it's your emotions. Saying this to both sides. Tour of the Gila was a UCI race, meaning that there were strict rules and tests to hormone levels. She passed it, and with this, she won the race fair and on her own merit. And I also saw that he won $30,000 as well for doing this. So So that's the thing.
So
Isn't it?
taking candy from babies, isn't it? It's that's about unfair. They're not babies. They're very impressive, hardworking athletes who compete, for money. These are professional athletes, and taking and a man taking that money who could never hope to earn that sort of money in the men's competition. He simply wouldn't be good enough.
Presumably, the other contestants, some of them might be quite wary in the competition of getting, again, really walloped by, as you're saying, Tom, that cycling has got this thing where you can be pushing people out the way.
You shouldn't,
but
it's a little elbow, a little sharp elbow. You've got to
an elbow from a 27-year-old bloke is different from an elbow from a 27-year-old female.
And you've got this, Marcelo Prieto, who lost the jersey to Austin Killips. There's pictures of her at the end of the race, an actual woman, like completely exhausted from trying to keep up with this man who has this obvious physical advantage over her. It's just absolutely dreadful, isn't it, for these women athletes? But what I would say about this is when you scroll through the Twitter feed on this, there's no neutral tweets about this, just reporting this like it were a normal sporting event. Everything is laced with controversy. So it's obvious, it's obvious that people can't just look past this like, this is just normal and this didn't happen. It's quite obvious to everyone really who's engaging with this at all that something is going on here. And I think the majority of people are clearly seeing this for what it is, which is just a colonization of women's sports by men who aren't particularly brilliant at their sport and can't compete against other men. There's no other way of saying it, really.
There's obviously comparisons to that swimmer. I can't remember his name.
Leah Thomas.
Leah Thomas, who won the American schools college, which is quite a big event. And I believe the backlash to that has led to transgender athletes not being able to compete in the women's sex, i.e. the correct understanding that what women's sports are protecting is the sex, not sort of some gender, regardless of your testosterone levels at the time. We can only hope this will happen again here. And it does look like British cycling was going to tighten things up, but that the British cycling are not the overall. They're not the world. What do you call it? Sort of advertising body. They don't control the whole thing. They only have control over what happens in Britain, which so Tour de France and all that sort of stuff is all UCI, which needs to step its game up.
You know what my criteria would be for who can compete in which sport is if you're born with a willy, then you're in the men's, and if you have no willy when you're born, then you are a woman. That's it's quite simple. You don't have to do any hormone testing. It's just if you had a willy when you came out, you're in the men's section.
But Jamie, don't forget.
Maybe that's too old school.
Don't forget, you're just a horrible person who hates everyone. Don't forget.
I'm conditioned by my.
You're heteronormal.
You're a heteronormal. You're speaking
patriarchal.
You're speaking from a position of power, Jamie.
I decided.
You have a willy, so you have power. So basically we can disregard what you're saying.
I decide when my three sons popped out, I said to myself, "Goodness me, that's that's a boy," but I was wrong. I should not have said that because I should have left it to them to grow up and to decide for themselves whether their willies meant that they were boys or not. But I didn't do that because I'm a patriarchalist and I hate all humanity. So I'm trying to box us all in with these repressive categories of male and female. Who do I think I am?
Should we move on to the Church of England?
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of, speaking
of willies, let's talk about the Church of England.
Speaking of not defining categories. So let me tell you how
we're going to get chucked off YouTube again, aren't we?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It was always going to happen at some point. So the Church of England. I didn't even know this was happening, but the Church of England have released a report, which apparently was commissioned by the Archbishop of Canterbury and York, which is called Love Matters, which was published Wednesday last week by some commission. It calls on all institutions, with a particular focus on the Church of England and the government, to prioritise family life in all decision making, for every person to support and commit to permanent, good quality relationships, whatever form they take.
I thought it was a film with Hugh Grant, but it's
Love Matters. Yeah, that's Love Matters, and that's Love Actually. There's probably got a bit.
Does the Archbishop stand outside Lambeth Palace with various signs, talking through a message like Hugh Grant?
Well, what I would say is I think Love Actually probably has a little bit more theological heft than this report. I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh, but this is a 236-page report, which I'm sure we're all going to be going to bed with tonight, just to make sure that we've gleaned every ounce of wisdom from it. There are 5 key messages directed at individual religious communities and the government. These are, here we go: value families in all their diversity, support loving and caring relationships lifelong. Shouldn't that be lifelong relationships? I don't know. Honor singleness and single person households, empower and protect children and young people with value and agency, and build a kinder, fairer and more forgiving society by removing discrimination, division and deep equality, such as of race and wealth. So sounding a bit sort of communist, sort of socialisty there. For some reason, later in this article in the Church Times, it says the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, humanitarian disasters and climate change are given as examples of challenges that need, quote, bold remedies. This might be to understand and address what creates uncertainty, disadvantage and inequality in crises, and to prioritize family well-being in the solutions. I literally can't understand what those words mean. I mean, that doesn't
it's word salad, isn't it? But and that's full of it. I tried reading it, and I got to I got to the climate change
page 2.
So they're thinking, but don't they realise that the number of people dying and losing livelihoods from climate change is literally at a historic low at the moment? Don't they realise that? Of course.
But what's that got to do with promoting family life, Tom?
Well, I don't know. But obviously they selected a few choice.
What's the Russian invasion of Ukraine got to do with a report on family life?
Now, is this report meant to do anything? They're giving this to a government minister. They're giving it to the king. I mean, what are they doing? What are they doing with it? Who's going to be chucking it into file 13?
It encourages us. This is what Archbishop Welby said. The report encourages us to prioritise the hopes, needs, and aspirations of families in all their diversity.
Go on, Tom.
And then the co-chair of the commission, Professor Janet Walker, OBE, described the report as a celebration of our multicultural society and the shared values across different faiths. It demonstrates the force for good when faith communities work together in partnership with local and national agencies and government and produce reports. Apparently, I mean, I tell you, the force, because there's no other real outcome, is there? So it's good to make reports. This report shows how good report making is made when it is done with a multicultural society and shared values.
We thought, didn't we, that the monarchy was the 8th sacrament of the Church of England, and in fact, it's actually reports and meetings. And I wonder how much
force for good.
I wonder how much this cost. Probably hundreds of thousands of pounds to put this together. And it reads, it reads like that line in The Life of Brian, isn't it? The Judean People's Front, when what must we do is make an action group together and write a letter to Pontius Pilate to ask him to be nice.
Can I just read a bit more? This is the one sort of, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of things you could say about this, but this is the one thing that stood out to me. The second chapter explores the intensely personal experiences of what family and household mean beyond biology or occupancy. Don't know what that means. Comparing these to more academic divisions as given by the Office of National Statistics, among others. One participant says, family is those whom you trust and have close relationships with, not necessarily blood relatives and not requiring children to be a complete family. Another says, I have a church family, which I am connected to through my church. Family is not just about those who live in the same household. Hey, Tom, can I just finish this point? As a single person who lives on their own, that ONS definition is problematic. So what I was going to say about this is they basically define family as literally any human relationships, which empties the word family of any content whatsoever.
You're right. I mean, what you'd want from a Christian reflection on, and this is the problem with this whole sort of genre, I guess, what you want from a Christian reflection is start with, what does our Christian tradition say about families? And actually, they kind of hedge around some really quite good points at times. Like, for example, that the church doesn't do enough to teach, to value, to support singleness and celibacy. It doesn't.
But Tom, isn't that a solo resolution though? I mean,
it is.
Every single church in the Church of England doesn't do.
The church as a whole doesn't really talk about it because it celebrates, and you see it in everything. Like, you see it in the church's advertising around marriages. The best day of your life. Et cetera, et cetera. And actually, I was surprised to find out how few people know St. Paul's teaching about singleness and about how that calling is so important to the Christian witness to the world. Now, and there are other things it does point out. And I mean, it's right to say that the church has to deal with families as they are, not sort of as we hope they would be. And I think I've already, I critiqued the sort of nuclear family before on this podcast, in that, it's a model of family, but it's not actually the fullness of the model of family that maybe our ancestors knew. The village as a family, the family as an extended family group, the tribe, effectively, as a family, and of course, it's not wrong.
Tom, there's no mention of marriage or anything in this, anything of that sort in this document.
Well,
it's not harking back to some kind of archaic definition of family. It's just providing a completely amorphous definition of what the family is.
Yeah, no, I know. But the point is, I guess the point is that this isn't the point. That there's no. What are they doing? What are they trying to do? And why are they doing it? Need to be asked. And if you want to do a Christian reflection on marriage, where do you start? You start with what the Christian tradition has said about families, say, and you start with what the Christian tradition of that is. And there are places where we can draw some rich stuff from, like the Paul's treatment of widows in the early church and the collections for them and things like that, which are really important, and they do sort of reflect on them a bit. But
in this article, Tom, there's no mention of the word Bible. There's no mention of the word God. There's no mention of Jesus.
Well, they can't really be held responsible for the Church Times article, can they? There are some.
Yeah, do you not think if this was actually being drawn from Scripture, there would be some scripture in it?
They do a sort of.
There's not a single quote from the Bible in this article.
Yeah, but there are quotes from the Bible in the actual document. I've read through it, some of it anyway, and they scatter it, but it's a sort of surface level scattergun approach to it. They'll say, "Oh well, love's important," and then they quote 1 Corinthians 13 about what Paul says about love, 13, and then they just leave it at that. They don't bother thinking about why Paul wrote that, what the context of that was, what this can actually speak to about love in here. They just sort of leave it there hanging, and that's not Christian reflection on Scripture.
That's just sort of spurious deductivism, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's a waste of everyone's time
into the Scripture, I can't help but think of. Every time they're mentioning the family in this, I keep thinking of Marlon Brando and the Italians. Sicilians have a very different idea of what family means.
Well, the fact is like this report clearly wants to. I don't really know how to say it. This report is clearly not promoting the institution of marriage as the normative structure as the normative bedrock of the family.
And that's the problem. It's not promoting the Church of England's theology and tradition of the family as the bedrock for society. It's saying, oh, this is what society is, and we need to celebrate it as it is. Now that is that's not what the point of Christianity is. It's a bit like,
I mean, really, they should change the name of the report to Nice Matters.
Yeah, or to, I mean, what it is we're back to Sandy Toksvig's thing about, the church being here to represent the society rather than being here to represent Christ to the society.
I mean, this is going to be a problem with the coronation coming, cycling back to where we were. I mean, one of the things that Justin Welby apparently is going to do is to contextualize the Christian presence of the coronation as holding, as the Church of England's mission to hold a space for all religions and faiths in the society. And I sit there and think, no.
Where's that quote from, Tom?
It's a quote from the Telegraph.
And it was on the Sunday program.
It was, yeah.
Who said it though? Was it Justin Welby?
It says when they released the it was from from either a palace spokesman or from, so presumably, Justin Welby doesn't say anything these days. He has spokesman to do that.
So just to be clear, is the Church of England's job to What was it?
Sort of hold a space for all religions in this world, in this country, and
Does that include Satanism?
Well, presumably, and Jediism and all that sort of stuff, which of course is completely nonsense, isn't it? The Church of England's role, and the reason the king has to swear an oath to it, is to promote, teach, and exhort people to follow the Protestant religion established by law, which contains truths witnessed to in our historic formularies, but drawn ultimately from the Scripture and from the life and death and resurrection of Christ. That's why we're church. We're not here to hold a space for anyone else. We're here to be angry.
Have you noticed how that phrase, including all faiths and none, has become more and more common at the moment, and it often comes out in Anglican official directives. We're here to include all faiths and none. We're the big tent. We're going to make sure that everyone's nice to each other, and that there's no friction. And it's it's an interesting intention, but it's so low resolution and doesn't really bring out the true sparkle of the gospel.
Yeah.
Well, it's not what the church is for. The church is there to celebrate the sacraments that Christ asked us to, and to remember him. So here we are. It's from this article it's gone. I think they've either changed it or updated it. But basically, a Lambeth Palace spokesperson said the Archbishop will contextualise the Church of England's modern understanding of this legal text, that being the Coronation Oath, namely that the Church of England seeks to foster an environment where people of all faiths and beliefs may live freely. I mean, that's not what we seek to do. Well, I mean, it's a byproduct. It's a really, obviously not calling for sort of blasphemy laws and the forbidding all other faiths. But the Church of England isn't there to do that. The Church of England is there to promote the Christian faith. I mean, that's
well, it's an overplay as well, like a lot of liberation theology, isn't it? That the marginalized and the oppressed are welcomed by Israel into their lands because, once we too were wanderers in the land. So we celebrate that, and we celebrate that diversity. And it's a gross misunderstanding of particularly the Old Testament, which, however, to those who come into the land, that there is an understanding of what the boundaries of what they can and can't do, and how the Judaic law is to be all encompassing. It doesn't mean that you can come in and supposedly, let's say in Israel, have polygamous relationships or
set up altars to Baal or whatever.
Set up altars to Baal.
Maybe they weren't inclusive enough, Daniel. Can I read something from a good article in Premier Christian Magazine by Harry Benson, which is called the Archbishop's Report on Families is a Capitulation to Our Times. And I bring this up because this is an example, to my mind, of what the church should be doing, which is defending and promoting the institutions that that are associated with it. Let's say, perhaps not the best phrase, but we do marriages after all. That's kind of, we do weddings. That's kind of our thing, and we're supposed to do families and things like that. Why marriage matters. The Archbishop seemed to have little to say on the social function of marriage, or why states and societies throughout history have regulated marriage in one form or another. The social function of marriage is to bond men to the mothers of their future children. The psychology behind this is deeply compelling, but the report only mentions it in passing. It is then brushed aside with a switch to the importance of commitment. Yet there is no real acknowledgement of how commitment works, or how both the act of marriage and or cohabitation actively influence it, nor is there a single mention of the relative stability and advantage that being married brings compared to not being married. There is a sea of literature on this subject, and a lively ongoing academic debate on whether and how premarital cohabitation undermines stability. In short, this chapter is a capitulation to the times in which we live. It's a bit like saying everyone smokes, and so we should accept and love smokers, and smoking is an equally valid choice of how to live. I actually think smoking is a great way of living, to be honest with you. Not that I do it, it's really bad for you, but I used to, and I used to enjoy it. But there we are. And also this guy, Harry Benson, assuming it is a man, I'm assuming it is with the name Harry, but sometimes girls have the name Harry, short for Harriet. He also does some historical stuff. For example, he's done a PhD in this subject, and he says that the historical claims that they make about, there's always been people cohabiting and it's always been, completely normal. He says that this is wrong. In his PhD research, I found plenty of sources showing that cohabiting was virtually unknown in England, at least between 1580 and 1960. Yes, people slept together and women became pregnant, but on the whole, they either got married or the baby was adopted or aborted. Unmarried cohabiting is a new family structure. And so I just thought that was an interesting historical detail. But you see what I mean? That's the kind of thing I think the church should be saying. They should be promoting marriage and saying, no, this is good for you. We should support this. It's not to say we want to condemn people who live together who aren't married. It's like we want to promote it, come and get married. And in our churches, it's great, do it for your own good and for your children and for the future of humanity. It's better than for not being married. There's nothing wrong with saying that.
And do you think?
No, hang on. Let's rephrase that, because that's not what Paul says, is it? It's not better than not being married. Not being married.
No, what I meant is it's better than cohabiting.
I know what you meant, Jamie, but it's again, there you go. It's sort of unconscious sort of sense that
it was in the context. I was speaking to a couple cohabiting.
Sorry, okay, you're speaking to a couple.
You could also promote singleness, but promote singleness for the reason that the Bible promotes singleness, which is
glorify God.
You'll be freer to prioritize the affairs of the Lord, not just
absolutely
prefer to be single and you don't want to take any responsibility. It's because you want to take that kind of responsibility, right?
Yeah. But I mean, being selfishly single, as long as you're not being, sexually active with anyone, is fine. I mean, that's not a sinful way of living in itself. No more so than. I know.
Well, it depends what you mean by selfishly there.
I guess, yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, that's a separate issue. But I mean, look, saying, just to go back to this main sort of thing, saying that we should promote families, and families basically means any web of human relationships, and that we should support people being single, is tantamount to just saying we should support everyone, which is kind of not really very interesting.
It's a waste of time
statement, isn't it? It's completely empty, vacuous.
I mean, it's true in as much as we do take everyone. We meet them where they are, but that's not the end point, is it? That's not what we're trying to teach. I would hope that people who are cohabiting, who come to Christ, would then decide to become married and turn from a sinful way of life to a godly one.
Do you think that what sometimes is happening from these official missives and reports, that in the liberal mindset, it is easier, it's intellectually lazier to create this Aunt Sally, a little straw man that essentially any other opinion, anything even mildly conservative, is extreme. It is pastorally insensitive, and that if you hold an orthodox view, of course you're going to be an unpastoral, dogmatic so and so. And that therefore we need to restructure our whole social policy, to present things differently. I find it's a sort of lack of courage and imagination and foresight into 2,000 years of generous Orthodox practice.
Yeah,
I think most of us on the ground are human and able to deal with these things sensitively.
Yeah, it's a lack of confidence, though, isn't it, Daniel?
It is. Yeah.
It's a lack of confidence, and I don't know. You obviously, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to presume, but I assume that the people who are involved in this report they're not vicars. They're not dealing with real people. I mean, I don't feel worried about promoting the institution of marriage in the church. You just do it with confidence and tact and sensitivity to people, and you'll be fine. Nobody's going to take offense. This kind of this sort of, I don't know, this fear it's completely unfounded. I mean, every once in a while you might have some kind of run-in with somebody who's got extreme views, but I don't know. I don't really come across this. You're a vicar, you're promoting marriage. No one's going to think that's outrageous, are you? I mean, are they? It's just, that's what they expect of you as a vicar. They expect you to be in favor of marriage. That's what you're there for. Marriage, whatever. Yeah, you can get married here. You can not get married, don't care. I mean, that's not really what you expect from a vicar, is it?
Yeah.
Anyway, promote singleness. That's another thing we're supposed to be doing, and I'm perfectly happy with promoting singleness. But the other, the flip side to that is that we're not supposed to promote singleness, are we? Because I thought we were supposed to say that everyone's should be involved in sexual relationships. Otherwise, they're not properly human, or whatever it is that we're
fulfilled.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's something I happen to agree with. Like in The Guardian, they have Jesus was single and single people should be valued, says the Church of England. Yeah, I agree with that. But the crucial issue there is whether or not they're saying celibate people should be valued. With single people, that can mean anything. That can mean somebody who's very going sleeping with 100 people a year. It can mean anything at all. So what are they actually saying? Because when Paul talks about not being married, he's meaning celibacy, isn't he?
And again, like being valued is one thing. Like what it's a sort of weasel phrase, isn't it? You can value someone whilst fundamentally disagreeing with what they're doing and telling them to stop it.
But when these reports just slap on theology on the end of it, like icing, I mean, this is what you get. And you said earlier on, Tom, that our relationships are for the kingdom, that if you're single, in a sense, this is releasing you for the kingdom in a different way than if you're married. If we started a document on that basis, that there is the kingdom of God, this wonderful movement of the Lord to gather up and perfect us, and that if we orientate ourselves to this, if our to use that theological word, if our teleology is towards the kingdom and God's purposes, then we have a meaning, a direction. We have a horizon to work towards. That to me, if you had a document that started in that place and they said, "Well, let's look at our relationships in that context." Wow. But instead, what we've got is a load of social sciences with a very thin veneer of theology slapped on like an afterthought. And you know what? It's like so much else. It feels like the bland leading the bland.
Very good. Very good, Daniel. I like that phrase. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, you coined it, Daniel.
Nice one. Chaps, we should move on. We should move on from this.
We should.
So one more church story. So this is to do with Mike Pilavachi, who's the founder of Soul Survivor, which is a church in Watford, but it's also a big youth festival. I mean, tens of thousands of people used to go to this in the summer. I never went to it myself, but my wife went to it a lot. She used to volunteer there and go for several weeks every year.
It was really big when I was a sort of teenage charismatic evangelical. It was like the thing. I never went to it, but all the songs we sang were Soul Survivor songs, and
people like worship leaders and songwriters like Tim Hughes and Matt Redman were part of it and stuff like that. So anyway,
and the Archbishop, I believe,
the Archbishop of Canterbury's been there,
very, very involved in it as well. Not that I'm trying to,
no guilt by association, obviously, but
it's something that comes within that territory of where he is in terms of his churchmanship and
so it's charismatic evangelical. So the guy who founded it and led it for many years, Mike Pilavachi, he's a vicar. I mean, you wouldn't know it to look at him, but he's a vicar. He's 65 now, and I think the whole thing stopped a few years ago, and he's stepped back from what's going on more recently than the festival itself stopped. But essentially, what's happened is that a number of young men, or I guess I don't know how young they are now, but anyway, they allege that he was involved in abusive behaviour with him. Now, I've read quite a few of the articles that have come out on the Telegraph, and it seems like the allegations they're not like necessarily sort of explicitly paedophilic allegations. And I was talking to my wife about this yesterday because she knew people who were she was very she knew lots of people around that time because she used to work in a church in London, or a sort of Christian thing in London, so she knew, she was kind of in the milieu. And these guys, they were sort of like, I'm obviously not trying to sort of soften anything that may or may not have happened, but they were sort of 18-year-old men, and they tended to be, there was this kind of joke that people used to make about how he was always surrounded with good-looking young men. He's a single man as well, so this sort of adds to the whole thing. But anyway, the allegations are there are some more specific ones, and then slightly sort of in the Telegraph anyway, slightly vaguer things. So the specific ones are that he used to wrestle with these young men in a way which made some of them feel uncomfortable, and that he used to perform massages on them and these may have taken place in his bedroom, and the young men may have stripped down to their underpants. And the other things are things like, psychological, not so much kind of specific things, but like, psychological abuse, bullying, the silent treatment, and having favorites and then dropping them and all this kind of stuff. And apparently lots of people have come forward and said these things about Mike Pilavachi. And there's an ongoing safeguarding investigation, which is being carried out by the, the Church of England National Safeguarding Team. Some people don't like that because they say the church is marking its own homework and so on and so forth. I had one comment on this before I get your guys' take on it. But it seems to me it's one of those things, isn't it, where allegations have been made against this guy, and immediately on Twitter, my Twitter feed is literally just filled with Christians who are, including people who are, sort of part of that milieu, just basically condemning Pilavachi and saying, for all survivors out there, thank you for coming forward, and here's a phone number you can ring if you have any, if you want to come forward and all this kind of stuff. And obviously, I've got sympathy for people who have been abused and everything like that. I'm not saying anything like that, but it does feel like a kind of kangaroo court. And I'm not excusing what Mike Pilavachi may or may not have done, but we don't actually know what he's done yet. And to my mind, some of the things, we're not talking about like, that 4-hour-long documentary about Michael Jackson and all the disgusting things that he did with, these 5-year-olds over a period of years, which, completely unacceptable, on any level. We're talking about, like, I would say, a sort of more ambiguous terrain at the moment, something like, body massaging. That sounds really weird and dodgy, so maybe not that, but like wrestling and like, and the silent treatment and things like that. Lots of people think that Pilavachi suffers from some kind of like bipolar disorder. So sometimes he's really hyper, sometimes he's depressed, and people who know about that condition know that it can be severely debilitating. So I'm not excusing him or anything like that. I'm just saying, to my mind, this is a weird story, and we don't really know what's going on. And I don't think it's right that people are condemned before they've had the right to be sort of investigated fairly. And I'm surprised at the amount of evangelicals on my feed. I've seen it from Matt Redman. I saw it from Amy Orr Ewing, who's an evangelical apologist, basically condemning him for these allegations. And I don't know. Something about that makes me feel uncomfortable, and I'm not sure that's right. So anyway,
I suppose evangelical culture has come late, hasn't it, to the game, to this, in terms of the Catholic Church, for instance, and all the abuse there. And I suspect within a lot of evangelical circles, particularly that some of the sort of more powerful upper echelons, there is probably a panic as to what else is there under the carpet, what
else is going to come out,
and that seeing what's happened, seeing the devastation that's happened in other denominations like the Catholic Church.
Well,
there's a rush, isn't there, to condemn and to be seen on the right side of history.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you've got, for comparison, like the a lot of the stuff about the Anglo-Catholic abuse wings. There was in Chichester particularly, great big numbers of Anglo-Catholic priests, single, supposedly celibate, who are abusing children. And that, I guess, there is a different order of trouble there, isn't there? Like, we're not saying that he's abusing children or indeed performing sexual acts with them. That's none of the investigation seems to be about that. Although that's. If it is like that, then that's obviously absolutely dreadful. But that's not come forward. And I
guess, you don't think, Tom, it's spiritual abuse?
Yeah. There certainly is spiritual abuse going on here of one sort or another. But he might not even have been aware of it. I mean, for example, wrestling is a bit weird. But if you're into wrestling, then it is a strangely intimate sport, isn't it? If you ever watch the
But I mean, has there been spiritual abuse? I mean, what
I guess he's using
abuse?
his position as a spiritual leader to bring athletic, attractive men from broken homes or with traumatic childhoods, and they're claiming, I mean, the language the Telegraph uses is that they were preyed upon and made to feel special by the celibate vicar, who they say led them to believe he held the key to their careers, happiness, and futures. Now that does sound like, I mean, in terms of a safeguarding position, like that is obviously like, I mean, stupid of him, like really stupid, and so it's sort of a lack of attention.
Well, Tom, it's an allegation, isn't it? It's not necessarily
Not necessarily
true. These were young men on a gap year. It'd be quite easy to spin lots of gap years like that. Like I did a gap year, and obviously I was a good-looking, attractive young man with lots of prospects, and I had two other blokes like me on that gap year. I mean, you could spin that and say, that was a form of spiritual abuse, because we were,
but I suppose
brought into this organization and promised, ministry positions, and made to feel special.
Were you massaged?
No, I wasn't massaged.
Okay, so I mean, I think
but that is the bit. That is the one bit. I mean, if the massage bit wasn't there, I'd be inclined to be even slightly more strong in my what I've just said. But the massage thing is really weird, and if that's true, then that is that's the point where you say, no, this is weird and this is unacceptable. That's all I'm saying. And you're right to say the thing about Chichester as well, because we're not at this stage anyway. We're not talking about Peter Bull level of child abuse. No. We're talking about something that's in a different category. We're talking about 18-year-old men who may have been taken advantage of in a disturbing and weird and potentially damaging way. All I'm saying is it's not the same thing as what Peter Bull did, having a bunch of men living in his house and literally committing paedophilic acts with them. I'm just saying that's different at this stage. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sorry, Daniel, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say that the story you were mentioning, Jamie, I suppose that could the difference here be that Reverend Mike presumably has enormous power, being on the top of the pyramid of an organization which hosts tens of thousands of people, and that if you were a young aspiring evangelical looking to a future in the Church of England, just like with Smythe and others, who are on similar tops of pyramid, that they could play psychological games with you. And that if you're in your early 20s, you are in a sense kind of more vulnerable in terms of your maturation to, say, someone in their 30s who might be able to sense the tricks that are being played against you. A lot of cults prey on student-aged people because they're out of their home context, they're disembogulated, homesick. I used to see that as a university chaplain, that the cults would come in quite swiftly, and cultic like Christian churches would take advantage of people and play all sorts of very subtle but wicked games. And I think the ghost lighting one was quite interesting. Sort of putting someone in Coventry and then bringing them out and bringing them back out. That you play games then with people where the respondent then has to feel that they have to amp up their love towards you. Clearly I'm not giving Reverend Mike the attention and the devotion that he deserves, and I must have done something wrong because he has thousands of followers and he's got an OBE, and he's best friends with bishops and archbishops and that, so it must be me, and I've got to kind of be just more loving and more accepting, I get what I mean. Yeah. I think I'm not trying to belittle the experience you have. I'm just saying that
it's okay.
In the middle of a huge structure like that, it could be quite terrifying to think, well, I don't want to, F up my career in the Church of England.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, Daniel.
A rising star.
I understand that, but all I'm saying is that these things can be spun to make them look a lot worse than they are. For example, in the Telegraph, it says Victims of a Christian youth festival founder have spoken out for the first time, claiming he ran a cult in which young men were encouraged to receive full body massages on his bed and engage in wrestling matches. That's very, very strong language, isn't it, to call it a cult? And then I found another tweet here, and this perhaps will speak why I've to my part of my concern. This guy, Matthew Draper, I don't know who he is, but he says, I trust us. I know when it comes to the Mike Pilavachi and Soul Survivor case, we are capable of reporting it as a pattern of abuse, which comes from purity culture, homophobia and repression, as well as power structures and culture and a culture of deference. So all I'm saying is that there is a willingness to believe stories like this and to make them seem as bad as they possibly can. And it comes from a desire to critique orthodox Christian views of human sexuality. And I've seen Jane Ozanne has been, absolutely just going for it on this score as well. So all I'm saying is that, the whole point of an investigation is to ascertain what's actually happened and to give him a fair hearing and not to condemn him before the facts are in. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and also we need to be careful that we don't. I think Ian Paul makes this point online. I'm just reading some commentary on this by David Green. We don't elude abuse with the potential for abuse. We must make sure we do not do that. So there is potential that this was a deeply unhealthy environment. There's potential that there was the potential for serious abuse within this environment. But at the moment, nothing illegal was done. There doesn't seem there's no evidence of coercion. There's no evidence of there's evidence of very poor safeguarding practice, but that doesn't necessarily mean that abuse has taken place. And we need to be able to hold as innocent until all the facts have been explored and the balance of probabilities of, which I believe is the balance of proof in safeguarding decisions, is looked at. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the practice is awful, but
what, Tom? Why do you say that? I mean, where have you heard, what do you know?
Safeguarding practice would not say that having one-on-one time with potentially vulnerable 18 teenagers who are workers for you as the leader and powerful leader of that organization would be a good practice. Certainly,
but you don't know what the practices were. You don't know what the setup was.
Okay,
it was a perfectly like up until the last few years, there was it was a perfectly sort of well-known thing that the Soul Survivor Festival happened, that Mike Pilavachi had a load of interns with him, and that they all went round, on his speaking tours with him and everything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, do we know the mechanics of how those relationships worked and how how the safeguarding regulations were followed or anything?
Yeah, I mean, assuming that what they're saying is true, assuming what they're saying is true, I mean, obviously there's an assumption there. There's not necessarily there's bad practice, but not necessarily intent of hurt from what's his name, Mike Pilavachi. He might have seen this quite innocent. He might have seen it innocent wrestling. Wrestling is something that's done. It's an Olympic
but
sport.
all I'm saying is like having.
He might have seen the oil, the massaging. I'm learning to massage. Can I practice on you? He could have been as innocent as anything in that, but nonetheless, the practice should have been thought, actually, this is bad safeguarding practice, and for obvious reasons. Just because it's if you swapped out a young man with a young woman in both of those things, you would obviously go, hang on a second.
No, I'm not saying it's all right to massage an 18-year-old in his underpants in your bedroom. All I'm saying is that I can see a situation in which it's theoretically completely acceptable for you to be a 50-year-old man who's running a gap year with a group of young men who you're discipling, who in your living room. I don't think that's some kind of egregious.
I think
safeguarding.
No, I agree, but I mean, I think probably wrestling them goes a little bit too far. But it's not necessarily malign.
I don't know about wrestling though. I mean, it depends, doesn't it? It depends on the circumstances.
I'd probably advise against it, Jamie.
Wrestling doesn't necessarally have to be sexual.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wrestle. I'd wrestle with my kids, but not with other people's kids. I think that's a good rule.
That's a very good rule. Unless
I think that there's it's completely different. Like, if this was some sort of fresh expression of church rest, I've seen there's kind of rest. There is a fresh expression wrestling church, isn't there? And
is that really?
Yeah, and people go and watch guys wrestle, and it's very stylized and ritualized, and clearly that's completely different from doing it in the vicar's study. Do you know what I mean?
Knocking over his ink pot. Yeah. Oh, that sounds cool. That sounds the fresh expressions wrestling. I mean, yeah, we've got to get some more information about that. Anyway,
I think very similar to the 9 o'clock service in the mid 90s.
What, wrestling?
No, the whole situation that the Reverend Chris Brain, who was defrocked in the end for the sort of alternative service that George Carey had praised because thousands of people were flocking to it, and they were on the verge of rolling us out around the country, and it ended up that Chris Brain liked having ladies in lycra massage him, who were also doubling up as altar servers. It was and the whole thing broke down, and it was a horrific safeguarding it was one of the big safeguarding bombs that happened to the C of E. I think one of the big first ones, way before Peter Ball.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that some horrendous things have happened that have been perpetrated by priests in the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church and in other in other church organizations. No one's playing any of that down.
And in all organizations, I mean, there's been,
in the BBC, the
police,
everywhere. Everywhere. So I don't want to give the impression I'm playing that down. All I'm saying is, what I'm saying is I don't think we should raise this to that kind of level unless it merits it. That's all I'm saying. Which it might, but we just don't know. Anyway, I think we should move on. So I just need to give a plug for our podcast before we just read a little email of the week out. So I always do this at the end because I sort of think if you've listened this far, you clearly like this podcast, unless you're just so angry by this point, you're like fuming with us and you just want to send us some hate mail. Tom, you have to go in a minute, don't you? Have you got enough time for me to do a plug before you have to go?
5 minutes. Go on, plug away.
Cool. Well, what I was going to say is that soon I am going part-time as a vicar, specifically so that I can spend a bit more time running this podcast and doing some public engagement stuff, hopefully making this podcast not way better. It can't get way better, can it? But like slightly, expanding what we're doing. If you like this podcast, please do consider supporting us, because that will really help us with this move that's happening only next month. So you can join just over 300 other people who support us monthly on Patreon, which means that you make a monthly donation to the podcast of as little as £1.50 plus VAT in the UK per month. £1.50, not very much, per month. And then you can support us. You will get our free, well, it's not free because you're supporting us, but you'll get our podcast, special audio podcast called Uncollared, which is where we sort of chew the fat and have a bit of fun talking to each other. So you'll get that. All patrons get that regardless of how much you subscribe for. And you'll get the episodes early. And of course, if you'd like to give more than £1.50 per month, you can do that as well. So do have a think if you like this podcast. If you want to support us monthly by going to Patreon, go to our website, irreverendpod.com, scroll down and find the big red button. That's irreverendpod.com. Scroll down and find the big red button and join us on Patreon. Or you can buy us a coffee, which is also a great thing to do. That's if you want to make a one-off donation to the show and leave a little message there. But please do consider supporting us. Quick email, Tom, before you go. At the risk of being quite presumptuous, I'd like to hear a little more contention between the revs. You're all jolly, decent English gentlemen, often at pains to agree with each other, but I wasn't this week, was I? Because I took some alternative positions. But the most absorbing discussions are the ones that become more animated. Just like an Oxford-style debate, the listener gets the most out of discussions when there are clearly articulated differences. Bring a little of the Toby and James energy to Irreverend. That's a reference to the London Calling podcast, people who don't know. I love what you and your colleagues are doing. I pray for you, and I will ensure I do so more often. You have been an important part of my Exodus journey from liberal to Orthodox Christianity. Yay. I am in the process of reorganizing some of the people I support through Patreon to support you in this most worthy venture in Christ the Victor. Very good. I love that email.
Well, I think
David.
We argued today, didn't we? We
definitely did some good.
We do. It really depends, doesn't it? Because in some things we're quite aligned, but in other things, we can have a good ding dong, between the low and high church elements of this podcast. That works. But I mean, Jamie, we try and stop that these days because you think people aren't interested.
That's more appropriate for the Uncollared podcast.
I just waffle on about my experience.
It's very hard to disagree with Daniel because I
have my lived experience, right. and I'm just right. Yeah.
Daniel's just right.
25 years ordained priest this month.
Wow, fantastic!
Really?
Congratulations.
You're having a special.
Yeah, I've just decided in the last week. Realised when I got my calculator out, and it's 25 years.
All right, you've only just noticed.
Yeah, so I'm trying to rush together to put something.
Oh, fantastic!
Oh, good luck.
All right. Time. Okay, well, Tom, we've got to go, and we need to finish this episode as well. So, Tom, you go, and then we'll say a little prayer at the end. Thank you for being with us.
Goodbye.
Daniel,
thank you very much.
Bye, Tom. Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Tom.
Daniel, have you got anything? Have you got a collect or something we can do? Or it's all right if you don't have anything right on hand, but we can put together something else if you don't.
I've got I've got it from the Church of England app, I'm afraid. So I apologise. I apologise to prayer book enthusiasts that it's not these and thous, but we are in the week reflecting on Christ as the good shepherd, the true pastor. So let's pray. Risen Christ, faithful shepherd of your Father's sheep, teach us to hear your voice and to follow your command, that all your people may be gathered into one flock to the glory of God the Father. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks to everyone for listening and watching, as always. If you want to support us, just a reminder, irreverendpod.com, support us on Patreon or buy me a coffee. We'd really, really appreciate that. Love to see people supporting us. And you will get the Uncollared podcast, which we're about to record right now. So if you want that, please go to patreon.com/Reverend or find it on our website, irreverendpod.com. But until next week, thank you so much and see you soon. Bye now.
Bye.